I'm Sophia, 30 years old, and I'm a firefighter in Sacramento. I never imagined the day would come when my parents would drop off my 7-year-old son at Child Protective Services, then happily board a flight to Hawaii with my sister for a vacation. They didn't leave a message. Just a single note that read, "Sweetheart, the boy will be better off with someone else." I was in shock, but I didn't scream. Instead, I made a phone call that ended with the police knocking on their hotel door. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's the journey of fighting to get my child back, reclaiming my dignity, and redefining what I thought family meant my entire life. If you're following my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to hear what happens next. I used to think I could handle anything: wildfires, car crashes, even late-night kitchen explosions, because I'm a firefighter. I learned how to suppress panic, breathe deeply, and act while others were still frozen in fear. But no one ever taught me what to do when your own family turns their back on your child. Tom was born in the fall, 7 years ago, when I was in my final year studying fire science. I found out I was pregnant just 3 weeks after breaking up with Anthony. I didn't have a love story, no promises of a complete family, just a tiny life growing inside me. My mother, Scarlett, was furious when she learned I'd decided to keep the baby. "You're ruining your future," she said, not meeting my eyes once in the 3 months that followed. My father, Logan, only said, "I hope you know what you're doing." Neither of them came to the hospital. Neither helped me through the sleepless months, and I didn't ask. I learned to mix formula with feverish hands, learned to cradle Tom in my left arm while typing fire reports with my right. Tom had eyes as deep and blue as Lake Tahoe, chestnut curls, and a smile that made all my exhaustion vanish. He was the reason I held steady through every shift, the reason I learned to fold every bit of trouble in my heart into a small, separate compartment, to leave room for the love of being a mother. We had Sunday mornings making muffins, bedtime stories of the little engine that could. Tom always made me the main character, even if it was just a tale about a little backhoe at a construction site. But outside those small moments, there were things I couldn't control. My family, often praised as the model family, my dad a bank branch manager, my mom working at a museum, and my sister Camilla, a graduate from a prestigious college who married a dentist and had 2 daughters that looked like dolls from a catalog. Their names were Ella and Lisa, and every birthday party, every family gathering revolved around them. Camilla worked part-time at a hotel but was praised by our mother as simply amazing for balancing everything so well. And me? I only showed up in passing remarks like, "Try to make more time, Sophia." Birthday gifts for Tom were usually clearance t-shirts, while Ella got the official Lego collection and Lisa had a whole wardrobe of princess dresses. Tom is allergic to animal fur, but at last year's Christmas party, my mom brought the neighbor's dog anyway, saying, "Let the kids have some fun." Tom's first piano recital was postponed because everyone was busy watching Lisa's ballet performance. I once tried to speak up, tried to explain to my mom that my son needed love and respect too. But she only scoffed, "You raised Tom differently, don't blame others for not understanding." I didn't say anything after that. Maybe I was tired, or maybe I still clung to the belief that family bonds could overcome misunderstanding. In January, I was urgently deployed to Los Angeles to help with wildfires. The babysitter kept flaking, and I had no choice but to ask my parents to watch Tom for 3 days. They reluctantly agreed, with a reminder: bring his own toys. There's nothing here that suits him. I prepared everything: his pillow, storybooks, even a detailed meal and sleep schedule. Tom wrapped his arms around me and softly said, "I'll be good. I'll be quiet. That's what Grandma and Grandpa like, right, Mom?" I nodded, but my heart tightened. I'd stood steady amid smoke and flame, gripping a fire hose. Yet in that moment, just watching my son walk into his grandparents' house, I felt an odd foreboding, as if I were handing him over to a place that wasn't entirely safe. I vaguely heard my parents mention a whale-watching trip in Maui, but I thought it was just a future plan. I didn't ask. I didn't know that just 3 days later, that very house would be empty, and my child would no longer be there. 3 days later, I returned from Los Angeles. My last shift ended at 3 a.m., my body covered in ash, the smell of burnt plastic still clinging to my hair. I was so exhausted I fell asleep in the passenger seat of the ambulance as a colleague drove us back to the station. My phone had died during the night. When I finally plugged it in and powered it back on, there were 3 missed calls from Tom's elementary school and a single message. Tom didn't show up for class. Please call back as soon as possible. My heart pounded. I called immediately. The principal, her voice steady but slightly urgent, asked, "Ms. Sophia, Tom wasn't at school today. He wasn't here yesterday either. We haven't received any absence notification." I stammered, "No, that's not possible. I left him with his grandparents. They didn't tell me anything." After the call, I phoned my father. No answer. Called my mother. Busy signal. Tried again. No response. The hands that once held a fire hose steady were now trembling as I typed a message. "Where is Tom?" No reply. I drove straight to my parents' house, just an 18-minute drive from the place I was renting. When I arrived, all the cars were still in the garage. The front door was locked. I knocked. No one answered. I went around back and looked through the kitchen window. The fridge was empty. There was no sign of Tom, no sleeping bag, no food containers I had packed. On the kitchen table was a single sheet of paper, folded in half, bearing one brief line in handwriting. "We've taken Tom to Child Protective Services. He will be better cared for there." No signature, no contact number, no explanation, no apology. I stood there, the paper in my hand, heart pounding, ears ringing like a fire alarm was going off inside my head. I thought I had misread it. I thought it was some sick joke. But the door was still locked. The house was empty. And Tom, my son, had been taken without my consent, without a single phone call. I called the police. I called CPS. Every minute stretched into eternity. Finally, after nearly an hour of overlapping calls, a woman named Andrea from Child Protective Services called back. Her voice was calm. "Yes, we are currently caring for a boy named Tom, around 7 years old, brought in by his grandparents, who reported that the mother was absent for unknown reasons. They signed the papers as guardians." My throat closed up. "No, I'm the legal mother. I was away on duty, fighting fires. I asked them to watch him for 3 days. They had no right." There was a pause. Then Andrea replied slowly, like someone realizing a mistake. "Do you have documentation proving full legal custody?" I sent over a copy of the birth certificate, my single-parent custody papers, and school records listing me as his legal guardian. Andrea apologized, promised an urgent review. "The boy is currently in emergency foster care with the Martinez family. They're a former military family, fully background checked. We'll arrange for you to see him as soon as possible." I collapsed right there on the steps of my parents' house. It didn't feel like losing a fire. It felt like being pushed into one by your own family. Not out of hatred, but because they thought it made sense. They didn't see me as a mother. They saw me as unworthy. And worse, they did it without hesitation. I saw Tom again the following afternoon in a small, cream-colored house in the eastern suburbs of Sacramento, the home of the Martinez family. They were a middle-aged couple, both former military, now retired, serving as temporary foster parents for CPS. As I stepped through the wooden gate, my heart pounded like it did the first time I entered a fire, without knowing where the explosion might come from. Mrs. Martinez opened the door. She gave a small nod and gestured. "He's in the living room. We've kept things as normal as possible." I walked in, still clutching my documents and ID badge for verification. Tom sat there, wearing the pajamas I had packed in his backpack. His eyes were wide, unblinking, staring at me as if I'd just returned from another world. Then he ran to me. No words. Just wrapped his arms around me. A small, skinny, trembling embrace. I could hear his quick breaths near my ear. Then, he whispered, so softly I had to lean down close. "Mom, you didn't leave me, did you?" I let the folder fall to the floor. No legal clause could ever matter more than those words. Tom began to sob as I held him close and whispered, "No, I will never leave you. Never." But he didn't believe so easily anymore. That innocence had cracked. I lifted him onto the couch and gently asked, "What did Grandpa and Grandma say to you?" Tom lowered his head, eyes red. "Grandpa said you needed a really long rest, that you were too tired and maybe wouldn't come back. Then Grandma said you didn't have time to be a mom anymore." My heart pulled tight, like it was being unraveled thread by thread. "Did they say I was only going away for a few days?" Tom shook his head. "No one said. They just took me to the office. Then someone else took me. I was really scared. But Grandma and Grandpa said, 'This is a better place for you.'" I turned to Mrs. Martinez, still trying to stay calm. She nodded gently in confirmation. "They didn't mention anything about you being away for firefighting. They said they were the legal guardians and that the mother wasn't coming back." That was when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an intentional decision. They wanted me gone from my son's life, not out of necessity, but because they believed he would be better off without me. I asked Tom, "Do you know why they did that?" He only shrugged. "I guess, because I'm not as good as Ella." My heart shattered. While I was out saving strangers from flames, my own son, the one I loved more than life itself, had been left behind, untouched, unspoken to, treated like a burden to be quietly removed. Andrea, the social worker, arrived that evening to take an initial statement. I handed over every legal document. Andrea looked at me, thoughtful for a long moment, then said, "I believe you. And we failed by not properly checking custody. But we can fix it." She promised to expedite the reunification process. "For now, Tom will stay here tonight for emotional stability, but you're welcome to stay with him if you'd like." I nodded, nearly collapsing onto the chair. Mrs. Martinez set up an extra bed beside Tom's. He held my hand tightly, his eyes exhausted but afraid to sleep. I whispered to him all night about the lighthouse that never goes dark, about firefighter uniforms with names embroidered on the left chest, and about the promise I'd never let anyone take from me, that I will always come back, no matter what. I woke up before dawn, still lying beside Tom, his small hand entwined in mine as if letting go would make him disappear again. His breathing was steady, but his closed eyes still bore the traces of tears. I sat up slowly, poured a cup of coffee from Mrs. Martinez's kitchen, and opened my phone, for the first time in 2 days, no longer as a firefighter, but as a mother betrayed. The first message was from Camilla. "I didn't think it would get this serious, but you have to understand, everyone needed a break. No apology, no acknowledgement, just blatant avoidance." I checked her Instagram, a photo of the whole family, Camilla, her husband, their 2 children and my parents, smiling under the sun in Maui, Hawaii. The post was dated the exact day Tom was handed over to CPS. Hashtags, family first, whale-watching adventure. I felt something cold rush down my spine. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't neglect. They had planned the trip ahead, while telling Child Protective Services they couldn't care for Tom, that I was missing, and my son needed to be placed elsewhere. I screenshotted every post, dates, timestamps, images, location. Every detail was evidence. I sent everything to Rachel, a college friend, now a family law attorney. She called back within minutes. "This isn't just unethical. If they deliberately gave false information to CPS to have your child removed while they went on vacation, this could qualify as fraudulent reporting, even organized child abandonment." Rachel told me to file an official report, not for revenge, but to create a legal record to protect Tom in the future. I nodded on the phone, eyes fixed on the photo of my parents holding cocktail glasses on a beach. That night, Mrs. Martinez sat beside me after Tom had fallen asleep. She handed me a cup of tea, then said, "Tom asked me something. I think you should know." I froze. He asked me, "Why do Grandma and Grandpa love Ella and Lisa more than me?" I set the cup down. She looked at me for a long while, then said softly, "I've cared for many children, Sophia. But few hide pain as well as Tom. He doesn't cry out loud, he doesn't get angry, he just retreats. And that's the kind of hurt that takes the longest to heal." I recorded her account. I gathered more messages from Camilla, including one where she wrote, "Mom and Dad think you're too stressed. Hawaii was a way for everyone to relax." Rachel told me to save it all, because every word could serve as evidence that this wasn't simple negligence, but a deliberate decision made without legal consent. I also dug up old emails between me and my mother regarding Tom's care. One clearly stated, "I'm asking you and Dad to watch Tom for 3 nights while I'm on firefighting duty in Los Angeles. I've packed his things, his pillow, and allergy medication." Proof they knew the arrangement was temporary. Andrea, the CPS worker, met with me the following afternoon. She brought updated documentation and said, "We've corrected the error. Sophia, you are the legal guardian, and we apologize for not verifying more thoroughly. Tom will be reunited with you within the week." I exhaled, but didn't feel relief. I didn't just want my son back. I wanted those who caused this wound to be held accountable, not just by guilt, but by the legal system. Not because I hated them, but because if I didn't act, another child might face the same thing, and the next mother might not be lucky enough to get her child back. I arrived at the Sacramento District Attorney's office on Monday morning, carrying a folder neatly secured in a leather case, screenshots of Camilla's posts, printed messages, emails, Mrs. Martinez's testimony, Andrea's notes, and the legal documents affirming I was Tom's sole legal guardian. Rachel came with me. She said before we walked in, "We can't guarantee they'll be criminally charged immediately, but we can file an official record, and once the investigation expands, every action will be brought into the light." I signed the complaint. Charges of child abandonment, false reporting, and abuse of temporary guardianship. My hand didn't tremble, but my heart tightened as I wrote my parents' names under the field marked suspects. That evening, Andrea came to the Martinez house for the final procedure. Tom would be reunited with me in 3 days, once the verification and paperwork were complete. When Tom heard the news, his eyes lit up like the sky after rain. But he didn't smile, didn't cheer. He just held my hand tightly and whispered, "This time, don't go away, Mom." I wrapped my arms around him, whispering back, "I won't leave. No one gets to take you without me." Mrs. Martinez looked at me and gave a quiet nod. She said, "This child needs adults with a spine, not just blood." 2 days later, I received a call from someone named Detective Wilson, assigned to investigate my complaint. His voice was raspy and brief, like someone who'd heard 100 cases just like this, yet never grew numb to their injustice. "We've reviewed the CPS records and cross-checked the testimonies. There's evidence your parents knowingly provided false information to legitimize the handover, despite being fully aware the arrangement was temporary. And worse, they left the state immediately afterward." Wilson asked me a few follow-up questions, confirmed the timeline of contacts, and requested proof that the Hawaii trip had been prearranged. I sent him a screenshot of the flight ticket Camilla had posted to her Instagram story, not taken down in time. That very evening, CPS called to confirm the reunification paperwork was complete. I could bring Tom home the next morning. I requested 3 days off from the fire station. Rachel helped me file for legal aid for the upcoming hearings. My mind no longer felt like a forest on fire. It was more like an underground current, cold, relentless, and unstoppable. The next morning, Tom stepped out of the Martinez home, carrying his small blue backpack with a firefighter keychain, the birthday gift I gave him last year. When he saw me, he didn't run right away. He stood still for a moment, as if needing to confirm it was real. Then he walked forward slowly, one step at a time. I knelt, opened my arms. Tom came into my embrace without a word, his arms wrapping tightly around my shoulders, stronger than ever before. I didn't cry. Because I knew the tears would come later, when I allowed myself to be weak. But for now, I had to be strong. For Tom. And for everything a mother deserves to be protected for. The following afternoon, I went to the CPS headquarters with Rachel to submit a supplemental report, recordings, photos, and a written statement from Mrs. Martinez. Andrea met us in a private consultation room, her gaze more serious than when we first met. "We've officially recorded your statement," she said, placing a copy of the interview transcript in front of me. "And we're currently cross-referencing it with testimony from your parents." I looked at the report. There was a section where they claimed Sophia is unfit to care for her child in her current condition, that I was missing, unreachable, and showing signs of breakdown. Andrea looked up, her voice slow but firm. "We found no evidence to support those claims. There was no missing person report, no medical records regarding mental health, and most importantly, they didn't contact any relatives or agencies to find an alternative caregiver before surrendering Tom to us." I sat up straighter. Every word from Andrea confirmed what I had sensed from the beginning. Tom's abandonment wasn't an accident, it was a decision, a quiet removal, rationalized through family ties and sugar-coated with lies. Detective Wilson, assigned to the case, followed up. "Neighbors next door to your parents said they saw the whole family leave that morning with full luggage and beach gear. There were no signs of distress. No one asked them to help watch a child." His voice was even. "I've seen many types of child abandonment, but it's rare to see one this calculated, this cold." That same afternoon, I received a message from Camilla. She asked to meet. A FaceTime call was arranged. I didn't want an in-person meeting. When the screen lit up, Camilla was in a hotel suite in Maui, the soft golden sunlight of late afternoon, and an unfinished cocktail behind her. She spoke immediately. No greeting. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Mom and Dad just thought everyone needed a break, and you were too busy to take care of Tom." I looked at her for a few seconds, letting silence settle between us. Then I asked slowly, "And you think taking a 7-year-old to Child Protective Services, without explanation, without a single call, is a reasonable act?" Camilla rolled her eyes, sighed. "You always act like the world's against you. I just wanted a peaceful vacation." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just said, in the lowest voice I could manage, "My son thought his mother had left him forever. He thought he wasn't worth keeping. And you call that a peaceful vacation?" Camilla said nothing. Her lips pressed together. The connection flickered. I ended the call before I saw another ray of sunlight. "Camilla doesn't understand. My parents haven't taken responsibility, but now the legal system is involved. And I know, this time, they won't be able to hide behind the image of a model family." I filed the official lawsuit on Wednesday morning. The court accepted the documents and flagged the case as potentially involving federal criminal elements due to signs of false reporting to a government agency and organized child abandonment. Rachel stood beside me in the filing room while I silently signed each page. Not because I was cold, but because every word I had left inside me was for Tom. Afterward, I took Tom to his first therapy session with Eliza, a child therapist referred by CPS. The office was small, with a bookshelf full of toys and a faded green couch in the corner. Tom sat next to me, holding a plastic dinosaur, silent for most of the conversation. But when Eliza asked, "Did you think your mom would come back?" Tom lowered his head, his lip trembling. "At first, no. But now she's here. Eliza nodded. Are you afraid she might leave again? Tom squeezed my hand, said nothing, but his eyes were wary, as if his little heart had built a fence, though he didn't yet have the words to name that feeling. After the session, Eliza pulled me aside, her voice soft but firm. You need to know something. When a child is betrayed by the people closest to them, they don't know where to put their trust, not even in their mother. Healing will take a long time and a lot of consistent action. That night, I sat on the bedroom floor, watching Tom sleep, one of his hands still resting on my shoulder. I knew I couldn't let him live in ambiguity any longer. The next morning, as he ate breakfast, I began. Tom, do you ever wonder why Grandma and Grandpa took you away? He stopped eating, silent for a few seconds, then nodded gently. I took a breath, choosing words that didn't cast blame, but also didn't hide the truth. They made a mistake. They thought you'd be better off without me. But they were wrong. And I'm working with the police now to make sure you'll always be safe. Tom asked quietly, Are you mad at them? I answered, Yes. But being mad doesn't mean you have to be. Just know this. I don't agree with what they did. And I won't let anyone ever do that to you again. When Tom fell asleep in my arms later that day, I called Camilla, not to plead, but to warn. She picked up, visibly irritated. Why can't you just let it go? She asked. I replied, You think this is a small matter, but Tom is in therapy, and the court is involved. You have the chance to respond differently now. Camilla scoffed. Mom and Dad just wanted a break. Can't you forgive that? I answered, without raising my voice, without wavering. They didn't take a break. They walked away from a child who needed them, and lied to make it legal. And Tom will carry that wound for the rest of his life if no one stands up for him. Forgiveness doesn't come before responsibility. 2 days later, the Hawaii police formally issued a summons to Logan and Scarlett, my parents, at the hotel where they were staying. According to Wilson, they initially denied everything. We just needed rest. Sophia always overreacts. But when officers presented their social media posts and CPS confirmed there was no missing person report or custody transfer, they could no longer stay composed. Wilson concluded, Your parents weren't just ethically wrong. They may face criminal charges for false reporting, obstructing custody procedures, and child abandonment. In the days that followed, Tom asked me more questions. Mom, if I'm not good, will you send me away like Grandma and Grandpa did? I bent down and looked into his eyes. No matter what, I'll always be the one standing beside you. I won't send you away, won't hand you over to anyone, won't disappear. He nodded, but I knew that wasn't full trust yet. It would have to be rebuilt through every small action, every promise kept, every time I showed up to pick him up on time. And no one else came instead. That weekend, Hawaiian police officially brought my parents, Logan and Scarlett, into an interrogation room at the local precinct, under federal supervision. Detective Wilson called me right after the first session. At first, they kept denying everything, he said, but once we presented the flight booking history, Camilla's messages, the CPS confirmation of your legal guardianship, and the formal complaint from your lawyer, they changed their tone. Specifically, my father, Logan, claimed that Tom had special needs and required a more stable environment while Sophia was away. But when asked why he hadn't contacted any other relatives or even Sophia herself, he couldn't give a reasonable answer. Meanwhile, Camilla, still in Hawaii, appeared unaware that our parents had lied to CPS about my condition. In a recorded call authorized for investigation, she sounded confused when told they had claimed to be Tom's legal guardians. I thought it was just dropping him off somewhere safe and coming back, she said. But when asked why she didn't notify me, she returned to her usual refrain. Sophia always overreacts. She needed rest, not more chaos. Within days, my parents were ordered by federal authorities to return to California for further investigation. At the airport, law enforcement officers confiscated their passports and issued a subpoena for their appearance at a temporary hearing. They weren't handcuffed, but my mother's expression, when she saw a few local reporters waiting outside, was no longer proud. Just a flicker of confusion and, perhaps, humiliation. That evening, as I helped Tom fold his clothes, Camilla called me via video. This time, I answered. Her face wasn't glowing anymore. Her sun-tanned skin looked pale, her voice softer than usual. "Sophia," she said, "I know things have gone too far. But did you have to bring the law into this with Mom and Dad?" I looked straight into the screen, my voice calm and measured. "They took my son to a government agency without warning, then flew off on vacation." "Tell me, Camilla, what part of this do you think didn't go too far?" She was silent for a moment. "They didn't mean to hurt anyone. They just wanted a break, and you always make everything worse." I shook my head gently. "You say that because you weren't the one standing at a locked door, holding a note that said your child had been handed off without your knowledge. You weren't the one who heard your son ask, 'Are you coming back, Mom?' with eyes braced for the answer to be no." Camilla looked down. Maybe she had nothing more to say, or maybe she just wasn't ready to hear it. 2 days later, the first hearing took place at the Sacramento Superior Court. I wasn't required to attend, but Rachel advised me to show up, to demonstrate my resolve and provide additional testimony if needed. I brought Tom, who waited in the children's room, separate from the courtroom. When my parents entered, I stood. I no longer averted my gaze. They looked at me too, for the first time since everything unraveled. My father said nothing, but his eyes held something indescribable. Anger? Shame? Or simply exhaustion from being exposed? My mother tried to keep her poise, but the soft belted beige dress and silk scarf couldn't mask the blankness in her stare. The judge read the initial charges: child abandonment, abuse of temporary guardianship, and intentional misinformation to a government agency. Rachel presented our evidence: social media posts, email confirmations from me, testimonies from Mrs. Martinez and Andrea. My parents' lawyer clung to one defense: thoughtless actions without malicious intent. But Rachel countered immediately: malice doesn't always come with a knife. Sometimes, being cold enough to turn your back, that alone leaves the deepest wound. By the end of the hearing, the court approved further investigation and imposed restrictions on Logan and Scarlett's contact with Tom until the case concludes. They were allowed to request visitation, but only under close supervision by social workers. As I walked out of the courtroom, I didn't feel relief, but I knew I had crossed a crucial threshold from enduring to standing firm. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an ungrateful daughter, but like a mother doing what's right. The first meeting between Tom and his grandparents took place on Friday afternoon at a family support center in downtown Sacramento. A simple room with one-way glass, gray upholstered chairs, and a small corner with a rug and a few toys. I didn't go in. The rules didn't allow it, and I didn't want to. This was Tom's space, a time for him to say what he wanted to say, or say nothing at all. A social worker would observe, take notes, and report back afterward. I sat in the adjacent room, gripping the firefighter keychain Tom always clipped to his backpack, a kind of ritual to steady myself. About 10 minutes later, the door to the visitation room opened. Logan and Scarlett entered. He wore a fully buttoned dress shirt, stiff as if heading into a bank board meeting. She wore sunglasses, though it wasn't sunny, only removing them once fully inside. Tom was already seated. When they entered, he didn't run up. No greetings. Just looked up, then down again. Scarlett forced a smile and began with a familiar line. "How are you, Tom?" He didn't answer, not out of anger, but because he was waiting for something else. Logan stepped forward. "You know, sweetheart, we only wanted what's best for you." Tom raised an eyebrow, repeating, "Then why did you leave me in a place I didn't know?" "Without telling Mom. Without telling Me. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, and colder than I'd ever heard it. Scarlett faltered. Logan cleared his throat. Then she sat down, leaning forward slightly, her eyes not on Tom, but on her own hands. I'm sorry if we made you sad. I just felt ashamed when everything went public. People look at us like we're bad. That sentence, that exact one, was the moment I saw something shift in Tom. He lifted his head, looked straight at her, this time without flinching. I'm not sad because people looked. I'm sad because my family told strangers my mom wasn't coming back. No reply. Nothing left to cover it up. After the visit, the social worker, Marta, documented everything. She said, Tom didn't withdraw. He wanted to hear an explanation, but the adults didn't bring one that fit. Then Marta added quietly, maybe just for me. Most adults, when they apologize, they don't say, I did something wrong to you. They say, I'm embarrassed people saw I was wrong. And kids, no matter how small, can tell the difference. That night, I asked Tom, do you want to see Grandma and Grandpa again? He was quiet, then softly answered, I do. But not right now. I nodded. I understand. And the choice is yours. No one can force you to forgive. Just know this. You have the right to say no. And I'll always be beside you if someone tries to silence that no. For the first time in weeks, Tom fell asleep without needing me beside him. He folded his blanket, placed his comfort pillow next to him, then said, Mom, leave the door open, okay? I'm not scared anymore, but I still want to know you're near. I left the door open, and I sat in the chair just outside, not because Tom needed it, but because I, too, was still learning how to sleep again in a world that had burned down and was just beginning to sprout green again. 3 months after the final hearing, I got promoted, not out of pity, but because I earned it. Fire Station 14, where I'd served for nearly 8 years, appointed me team captain after our former chief transferred. People often think firefighters get recognized for charging into burning buildings or pulling survivors from wrecked cars. But in truth, what got me chosen was my ability to stay calm, even in fires without flames. The days you survive without screaming. The hard decisions made with compassion still intact. Tom changed, too. He still saw Eliza weekly and began drawing more. One of his pictures is taped to our fridge, a small house with a balcony full of cacti and a mother watering them with a blue can. That's you, he said, because you didn't go away even when there were no flowers. I didn't say anything, just touched the corner of the paper to remind myself that sometimes love doesn't have to bloom bright, it just has to stand still through the drought. For Tom's 10th birthday, I didn't host at a restaurant or park. I invited friends, not relatives, but those who stood beside me through the storm. Rachel, the sharp yet gentle lawyer friend, Mrs. Martinez and her husband, who embraced Tom when I couldn't, Kelly, my colleague who took extra shifts so I could go to therapy with my son, and Eliza, who understands invisible wounds better than anyone. We set up a small party table in the backyard. There was chocolate cake, Tom's favorite, and tacos Mr. Martinez made by hand. No fireworks, no professional cameras, just string lights hanging along the wooden fence, soft music, and laughter that didn't have to be forced. Tom got a new bicycle. Not expensive, but with a low seat and a little flag holder at the back. He rode it in circles on the grass, red shirt fluttering like a tiny kite. When I lit the candles, Tom stood beside me, hand gently on my back. I asked, "What do you want to wish for?" He looked at me, and for the first time in months, his eyes held no hesitation. "I don't need to wish. I already have it." I lowered my forehead to touch his. In that moment, I realized I didn't need a perfect family with all the roles filled just right. I just needed the ones who chose to stay when things got hard. When night fell, I packed up the table, rinsed glasses, and boxed leftovers for the neighbors. Kelly stayed last, refilling our wine. She looked at me and asked quietly, "Are you okay?" I nodded, and this time, it wasn't to deflect. It was a full nod. The kind that belongs to someone who's walked through fire and emerged not to seek revenge, but to rebuild. Steady hands, no longer shaking. I didn't reach out to Camilla, but she was the one who wrote first. A short email, subject line, "You can read this if you want." In it, Camilla wrote, "I told my therapist that I never realized the extent of favoritism in our family. But after everything that happened, especially when Ella asked why Tom wasn't invited to last year's Christmas party, I started to remember the dinners where you were overlooked, the gifts that weren't wrapped, the comparisons that seemed harmless. I'm not sure what exactly I did wrong, but I know I stood with the silence. And sometimes, silence is the cruelest choice." I read it over and over, didn't respond right away. A week later, I sent a single sentence. "Awareness is the first step, but repair takes action." Following the preliminary hearing, both my parents were required to attend family therapy as part of the legal agreement. I agreed, not because I believed they would change, but because I believed Tom deserved to hear something real, even if only once. The first session took place in a softly lit room, with greenery in the corner and a faint scent of lavender in the air. My father, Logan, sat with his hands clasped, eyes low. Scarlett scanned the room, as if searching for an invisible exit from four closed walls. Tom sat next to me, not avoiding eye contact this time. He wanted to hear, and to be heard. The therapist, a woman with salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes, and a warm voice, asked a simple question. "Do you believe Tom ever felt compared to the other grandchildren?" Scarlett answered immediately, "I love all my grandchildren equally." But before she could say more, Tom raised his head. He said, "I know you love Ella and Lisa more, because you smile when they mess up, but when I mess up, you just look like I'm bothering you." Scarlett went quiet. No one saved her from that truth. No explanations, no defenses. The therapist turned to my father. "Did you ever notice Tom being treated differently?" Logan stared at the floor, his voice lower. "I used to think, Sophia chose a single life, not what I wanted, so her child didn't deserve the same as the others." I didn't look away, didn't cry. I just looked at him, like watching an old clock finally admit it had been running wrong all along. Tom asked, "Do you see me as part of the family?" Logan looked up, his eyes red. "I was wrong. You are a part, and I'm sorry I didn't show you that from the beginning." Not a perfect apology, but for the first time, it was real. The sessions that followed remained quiet and heavy, but eventually, the silence became easier to breathe. Scarlett didn't soften easily. At one point, she said, "I'm sorry Sophia had to struggle, but I don't think I was wrong to want the grandchildren to have a beautiful vacation." I simply replied, "You wanted a vacation, but I have to heal from it." She said nothing back. Tom kept his distance. He didn't refuse to see his grandparents, but he no longer hugged them like before. One evening on the way home, he said to me, "I can forgive, but I don't want things to go back the way they were." I hugged him. "You don't have to go back, Tom. We can move forward. From a safe place." I've come to understand that forgiveness isn't an eraser. It's the act of rebuilding boundaries, so no one crosses them again, not even family. At the end of that summer, Tom and I moved into the first home I ever bought, a small house with 2 bedrooms, a backyard just big enough for a few pots of mint and some tomato beds. We didn't hang family photos on the walls. Instead, Tom drew. One picture showed me washing dishes at the sink, while he stood nearby in an apron far too big for him. "Mom is a superhero," he captioned it, but I only smiled. I didn't need to be a hero. I just needed to stay when he needed me. The Martinez family still visited at the end of every month, Rachel occasionally brought pastries and sat on the balcony drinking tea. Camilla sent a few emails. No more justifications, just check-ins and requests to send birthday gifts. I let Tom decide. Once, he said, I like the Lego set, but I don't like the note that says, "Love you so much." I asked why. Tom replied, I want people to love me by being there, not by writing it on a card. That line. I kept it taped to the fridge. Not to teach him, but to remind myself. The court finally closed the case with a plea agreement. My parents were required to attend mandatory counseling, complete community service, and were barred from contacting Tom without social worker approval. They didn't go to jail, but they also haven't called since. I'm not waiting. One afternoon, as Tom and I were unpacking old boxes of books, he asked me, "What is family, Mom?" I thought for a moment, then answered, "It's the people who stay, even when they have the right to leave." Tom nodded quietly. Didn't ask anything else. I knew he understood, not with his mind, but through every time I showed up at school on time, every night I sat by his bed when he jolted awake, every morning we split the last bit of peanut butter on toast. Family, for us, is no longer defined by shared blood. It's defined by who chooses to stay, protect, and apologize when needed. It's the one who won't sign a form to give your child away when you're gone. It's the one who asks, "Are you okay?" and waits for the answer with quiet presence. I used to think family was the place that never left you behind. Now I understand. Real family is made of those who come back, even if they once turned away. And when they don't, we still have the right to build a new home, where love doesn't need DNA tests, only consistency in action. Have you ever had to choose between staying silent to keep the peace and standing up for what's right? Have you ever had to draw a boundary even though you knew it might get you labeled as selfish? If you have, share your story in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, your story will help someone else find the courage they need. If my journey resonates with you, hit like and subscribe so we can continue exploring stories of strength, healing, and choosing real love. Because family sometimes isn't where you were born, but where you're respected, heard, and never left behind. Thank you for listening.